Annie Wilkes. Annie Wilkes is one of the most terrifyingly human villains in cinema history, and Kathy Bates's portrayal turned what could have been a typical horror antagonist into a character study of obsession, mental illness, and distorted devotion. Bates made a deliberate choice not to play Annie as a cartoonish movie monster. Instead, she portrayed her as a real broken person whose mind has completely unraveled. Annie's mood swings, from syrupy sweetness to explosive rage, are not just frightening but deeply unpredictable, which keeps both the audience and Paul Sheldon, played by James Caan, perpetually on edge. Bates rooted Annie's pathology in her own understanding of obsession, famously saying that she had that side to her and knew how it felt. This commitment to finding Annie's humanity made the character believable and unnervingly relatable. Stephen King has admitted that Annie represented his own struggle with substance abuse in the 1980s, describing her as his drug problem that never wanted to let go. Psychologists have since analyzed Annie as a near-perfect depiction of borderline personality disorder. Her paranoia, childish language like cockadoodie and dirty birdie, and her violence, when her expectations are not met, all align with this diagnosis. Bates and director Rob Reiner even invented a secret backstory for Annie, deciding she had been abused by her father as a child, which gave Bates an emotional anchor for Annie's twisted desire to nurture and control. The film's most infamous moment, the hobbling scene, was originally scripted as a foot amputation with an axe, but Reiner changed it to ankle breaking with a sledgehammer. Bates initially hated this change, thinking the axe had a poetic symbolism like a nurse with a scalpel, but the resulting scene became one of the most memorable moments in horror history. The psychological impact of filming it was so intense that Bates wept before and during the shoot. Her tension with Caan on set was real. Their different acting methods created friction, and Reiner told Bates to channel her irritation into Annie's anger, heightening the realism. The role earned Bates the Academy Award for Best Actress, a rare achievement for a horror performance, and during her acceptance speech, she famously apologized to Caan for the ankles.
I would like to thank Jimmy Caan and apologize publicly for the ankles.
Ironically, the character that catapulted her to stardom left Bates feeling unprepared and exposed in real life, like a country bumpkin in Hollywood. Annie Wilkes endures as the ultimate symbol of obsessive fandom turned deadly, a cautionary tale about the dark side of devotion and the perilous line between admiration and possession. Alex Forrest. Glenn Close's portrayal of Alex Forrest in Fatal Attraction redefined what a cinematic antagonist could be by grounding her entirely in psychological realism. Close insisted from the outset that Alex was not a villain but a woman in pain who desperately needed help. To prepare, she consulted psychiatrists to understand the motivations behind Alex's erratic and destructive behavior. Their input led Close to develop a private backstory. Alex was a survivor of incest, a trauma that left her unable to form stable adult relationships and drove her toward obsessive, self-destructive patterns. This insight shaped Close's entire performance, allowing her to play Alex as someone whose actions are tragic extensions of untreated trauma rather than mere malice. The turning point of Alex's psychological unraveling comes with the wrist-slitting scene, a moment that signals to both Dan Gallagher, played by Michael Douglas, and the audience that this is no simple fling but a dangerous situation spiraling out of control. The original ending of the film reflected Close's nuanced interpretation. In that version, Alex slit her own throat in a staged suicide designed to frame Dan for murder, with a recorded suicide threat ultimately clearing him. This conclusion presented Alex as a tragic figure whose death was the final act of a deeply disturbed mind. However, test audiences in 1987 rejected this ending, finding it anticlimactic and craving retribution. The studio reshot the climax, transforming Alex into a knife-wielding invader who breaks into the Gallagher home, leading to her being shot and killed by Dan's wife Beth. Close fought this change fiercely, even screaming at Douglas in protest, believing it betrayed the character's humanity. Nonetheless, the reshot ending gave audiences the violent catharsis they wanted, cementing Alex as one of cinema's great villains while stripping away much of her psychological complexity. A crucial but often overlooked element of Alex's story is her pregnancy, which is never conclusively shown to be a lie. The original ending made its reality clear, paralleling the opera Madame Butterfly, which plays during her death and mirrors her situation, a woman abandoned by a man who fathered her child. The theatrical ending leaves this unresolved, making the audience cheer for the violent death of a potentially pregnant, severely mentally ill woman. Alex Forrest's legacy is enormous. The term bunny boiler, inspired by her boiling Dan's daughter's pet rabbit, entered popular culture as shorthand for obsessive, dangerous women. Over time, however, critical reappraisal has cast Alex not as a monster but as a victim of societal failure, a character whose pain was sensationalized to fit a morality play about infidelity and domestic security. Elle Driver. Elle Driver, the one-eyed assassin known as California Mountain Snake, is Quentin Tarantino's most unapologetically sadistic creation, a character driven by pure spite, envy, and ambition. To To prepare for the role, Daryl Hannah underwent intense training under martial arts legends Yuen Wu-ping and Sunny Chiba, mastering sword techniques, wire work, and combat choreography. The signature eye patch was not merely a costume accessory, it forced Hannah to relearn her movements to compensate for lost depth perception, adding a layer of realism to Elle's fights. Off-camera, Hannah was so captivated by the filmmaking process that she stayed on set even when not filming, working as part of the crew to study Tarantino's directing style. Within the narrative, Elle is a member of the Deadly Viper Assassination Squad, and her codename is layered with meaning. The California mountain kingsnake is non-venomous but known for eating other snakes, foreshadowing Elle's betrayal of Bud when she kills him with a black mamba in order to claim the glory of Beatrix Kiddo's death. This choice also symbolically fulfills Beatrix's revenge by proxy. Bud is literally killed by the snake named after his nemesis. Elle's jealousy runs deep. She coveted Beatrix's status as Bill's lover and his most skilled assassin, but she could never escape being second best. This inferiority complex drives her every action, including her cruelest, poisoning their master Pai Mei after he plucked out her eye for her arrogance. Her introduction in Kill Bill Volume 1 is one of cinema's most chilling entrances. Dressed in a nurse's uniform, she whistles the haunting tune from Twisted Nerve, while strolling toward a comatose Beatrix with a syringe of poison, only to be called off by Bill at the last second. This moment perfectly distills Elle's character, casual cruelty blended with theatrical flair. Her final confrontation with Beatrix in Bud's trailer is one of the most brutal and claustrophobic fight scenes in Tarantino's filmography. After a vicious, dusty brawl, Beatrix blinds Elle by plucking out her remaining eye, leaving her screaming and thrashing helplessly on the floor as a black mamba slithers nearby. Tarantino leaves her fate unresolved, ending her story with a question mark in the credits. Elle Driver remains memorable because she is not softened or redeemed. She is a rare cinematic villain whose motives are simple but electrifying: envy, pride, and rage, and whose downfall is a poetic reversal of her own crimes. Bellatrix Lestange. Bellatrix Lestange is the embodiment of Voldemort's most fanatical and dangerous follower, a witch whose gleeful sadism and obsessive devotion make her one of the most unforgettable villains in fantasy cinema. Helena Bonham Carter transformed Bellatrix from a terrifying book character into a cinematic force of chaos. She approached the role with fearless improvisation, which kept her co-stars constantly on edge and added an unpredictable energy to every scene. Jason Isaacs, who played Lucius Malfoy, admitted that she was allowed to do anything she wanted on set because her improvisations were so effective. Bonham Carter also helped craft Bellatrix's distinctive appearance, rejecting the original idea of a plain black sack costume and working with designer Gianni Temime to create a shredded, corseted look that conveyed decayed beauty and unrestrained madness. Bellatrix's villainy is rooted in both ideology and personal obsession. Raised in the pure-blood, obsessed House of Black, she embodied its motto, toujours pur, and carried that bigotry into adulthood, believing half-bloods and Muggleborns were beneath her. Yet her allegiance to Voldemort went beyond ideology. J.K. Rowling has confirmed that Bellatrix was madly in love with him, and this love became her primary motivation. Voldemort gave her the validation and respect denied to her as a woman in her aristocratic but patriarchal family, elevating her as his most trusted lieutenant. This explains the fervor behind her most notorious crimes, from torturing the Longbottoms into insanity, to murdering her own cousin Sirius Black during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. Visually, Bellatrix is marked by her wild hair, claw-like wand, and feral energy. Even her wand is symbolic. Its curved, talon-like shape reflects her predatory nature. One on-set mishap speaks to Bonham Carter's ferocity. While filming Order of the Phoenix, she accidentally perforated Matthew Lewis's eardrum when she jammed her wand too far into his ear during a scene, an incident that left her mortified. Bellatrix's final moments are some of the most satisfying in the series. During the Battle of Hogwarts, she nearly kills Ginny Weasley, prompting Molly Weasley to deliver the now-famous line, "Not my daughter, you bitch," before dueling and killing Bellatrix. This death is more than a victory. It is symbolic of the triumph of maternal love over fanaticism and cruelty. Bellatrix remains one of the most magnetic figures in the Harry Potter universe because she is at once terrifying, charismatic, and tragic. A woman whose brilliance and power were consumed entirely by her devotion to darkness. Maleficent. Maleficent is one of cinema's most enduring villains, a character who has evolved from a symbol of pure evil into a complex, tragic figure of power and redemption. In Disney's Sleeping Beauty, from 1959, she is introduced as the mistress of all evil, cursing Princess Aurora simply because she was not invited to the christening. Animator Mark Davis designed her as tall, regal, and frightening, with a horned headdress inspired by religious iconography. He wanted her to wear black and red, representing fire and danger, but production designer Avon Earle insisted on black and purple, which ultimately became her signature look. The voice that brought her to life was provided by Eleanor Audley, who also served as the live-action reference for her movements. Audley initially turned the role down while recovering from tuberculosis, but later accepted and delivered one of Disney's most iconic vocal performances. The original Maleficent is a force of unrelenting malice, commanding green fire and transforming into a dragon in the film's climactic battle. She represents the archetypal, monstrous feminine, a powerful woman outside patriarchal norms who must be destroyed by a male hero, Prince Philip. Her curse is not nuanced or sympathetic, it is vengeance for wounded pride. This portrayal set the standard for animated villains for decades, becoming the visual and thematic template for evil witch characters in popular culture. The 2014 live-action film Maleficent radically reimagines the character, turning her from a flat villain into a wounded anti-hero. In this version, Maleficent begins as a benevolent fairy who guards the magical moors. Her transformation into darkness is triggered by a brutal act of betrayal. Her childhood love Stefan drugs her and cuts off her wings to gain the throne. This assault, widely interpreted as a metaphor for sexual violence, reframes her curse on Aurora as an act of calculated revenge against Stefan rather than an attack on the child. Over 16 years, however, Maleficent's hatred evolves into love as she secretly watches over Aurora, ultimately breaking her own curse with a kiss on Aurora's forehead, redefining true love's kiss as an act of maternal devotion rather than romantic salvation. Angelina Jolie was instrumental in shaping this reinterpretation. She worked closely with makeup master Rick Baker to develop the character's striking look, including sharp cheek prosthetics, goat-like contact lenses, and the iconic horned headpiece. Jolie's performance humanizes Maleficent without stripping her of her menace, allowing the character to embody both terror and tenderness. This evolution reflects a cultural shift in how audiences view female power. Maleficent is no longer simply a villain to be slain but a survivor reclaiming agency, making her one of Disney's most compelling reimaginings. Regina George. Regina George is the definitive queen bee of high school cinema, a character whose charm and cruelty have made her a cultural touchstone for 2 decades. Rachel McAdams' performance is a masterclass in controlled menace. Director Mark Waters noted that she dominated the audition room and even intimidated Lindsay Lohan, which convinced the filmmakers she was perfect for the part. To prepare, McAdams immersed herself in volatile music like Courtney Love's and studied Alec Baldwin's commanding performance in Glengarry Glen Ross, using these influences to build Regina's air of authority and sharp-edged anger. Regina is not just a mean girl, she is the apex predator in a carefully structured teenage social ecosystem. The film, based on Rosalind Wiseman's book Queen Bees and Wannabes, frames North Shore High School as a literal jungle, with Katie Heron observing that Regina sits at the very top of the food chain. Regina wields power by manipulating those around her, maintaining control through rules like, on Wednesdays we wear pink, and exclusionary tactics like the burn book. These behaviors are not just for entertainment, they reflect a defense mechanism rooted in insecurity. Queen bees often project confidence to mask their fear of becoming irrelevant, which fuels their need to dominate. McAdams' performance shines in moments that reveal Regina's complexity. When she is hit by a bus near the end of the film, it is a shocking reversal that strips her of her power and forces her to re-enter the high school ecosystem as just another student. Yet, even in that state, she channels her competitive drive into sports, becoming a lacrosse player and finding a healthier outlet for her aggression. This evolution gives Regina a subtle redemption arc without excusing her manipulative reign. The cultural impact of Regina George is massive. Mean Girls is one of the most quotable films of all time, with Regina at the center of its most iconic lines. "Get in, loser, we're going shopping," and "So you agree? You think you're really pretty?" have become part of internet and meme culture. Real-life students have reported burn books and cliques eerily similar to the plastics, confirming the film's resonance. Regina George's legacy is that she is not merely a villain, but an archetype, an exaggerated but truthful mirror of adolescent power dynamics, immortalized as the ultimate queen bee of the big screen. Regan MacNeil. Regan MacNeil is the quintessential image of corrupted innocence, a sweet 12-year-old girl transformed into the vessel of an ancient demon in William Friedkin's groundbreaking horror masterpiece. Casting Regan was critical, and Linda Blair was chosen for her ability to handle the film's dark, adult themes with maturity well beyond her years. The process of filming was grueling. The set for the possession scenes was kept at sub-zero temperatures to make the actor's breath visible, forcing Blair to perform in little more than a nightgown, while the crew wore heavy coats. The physical demands were even harsher. She was strapped to mechanical rigs for the thrashing scenes, and when one malfunctioned, she suffered a fractured spine. The harrowing screams heard in the film are real, captured as Blair cried out in genuine pain, an injury that led to years of chronic back issues and scoliosis. The special effects were practical and often punishing. The 360-degree headspin was achieved using a life-size dummy, but the pea soup projectile vomit was very real, delivered through a tube strapped to Blair's chin. Multiple beds were built for different effects, including one that levitated and one that violently shook. Blair endured hours in prosthetic makeup each day, which caused facial irritation and burns. The demon's voice was performed by actress Mercedes McCambridge, who created the guttural, terrifying sound by chain-smoking, drinking whiskey, and swallowing raw eggs to roughen her throat. Friedkin even had her tied to a chair while recording to simulate the physical strain of demonic struggle. When The Exorcist was released in December of 1973, its impact was explosive. Audiences fainted, vomited, and fled theaters, and Blair, only 14 at the time, was thrust into the media spotlight. Rumors spread that she had been mentally scarred by the role, but Blair repeatedly clarified that she understood it was just acting. The backlash from religious groups was intense. Evangelists called the film the work of the devil, and Blair began receiving death threats, forcing Warner Brothers to hire bodyguards to protect her during the press tour. Regan's transformation remains one of the most disturbing images in cinema, from a shy, horse-loving girl to a monstrous figure screaming blasphemies, levitating and mutilating herself. Her story is a chilling exploration of innocence lost and the battle between faith and evil. Regan MacNeil became the archetype of possession horror, inspiring decades of imitators and establishing The Exorcist as the definitive benchmark for the genre. The Wicked Witch of the West. The Wicked Witch of the West is the definitive screen witch. Her green face, pointed hat, and shrill cackle have become the universal shorthand for evil. Margaret Hamilton, a former kindergarten teacher turned character actress, was cast only 3 days before filming began, after Gail Sondergaard dropped out when the studio decided the witch should be hideous rather than glamorous. Standing at just 5 feet tall, Hamilton used her sharp voice and commanding presence to make the witch feel towering and terrifying. Her rapid-fire delivery and menacing laugh created a performance so frightening that children reportedly fled theaters in tears for decades afterward. The production of The Wizard of Oz was famously dangerous, and Hamilton endured some of its worst mishaps. Her iconic green skin was created using a copper-based makeup that was toxic if ingested, forcing her to live on a liquid diet during filming. More dramatically, she was severely injured while filming her fiery exit from Munchkinland. A pyrotechnic effect was triggered too early, engulfing her in flames and causing second-degree burns on her face and third-degree burns on her hand. Hamilton spent 6 weeks in the hospital, recovering, and refused to work with fire again, forcing the studio to use a stunt double for the remaining fire scenes. Tragically, even the stand-in, Betty Danko, was seriously injured when a broomstick pipe exploded during a flying sequence, leaving her permanently scarred. The character's on-screen portrayal differs significantly from Elle Frankbaum's novel. In the book, the witch has only one eye, uses an umbrella instead of a broom, and is ultimately more cunning than theatrical. The film amplified her personality and gave her green skin, a choice made specifically to take advantage of the new Technicolor process. This decision forever changed how witches would be depicted in pop culture. The Wicked Witch's cultural legacy is massive. The American Film Institute ranked her the 4th greatest movie villain of all time and the #1 female villain in cinema history. Her influence can be felt in everything from Halloween costumes to modern fantasy villains. The character was later reimagined in Gregory Maguire's novel Wicked and its blockbuster Broadway musical adaptation, where she is reinterpreted as Elphaba, a misunderstood revolutionary fighting systemic corruption. Even Hamilton herself once speculated that there might have been a reason the witch turned out so wicked. The character has thus evolved from pure archetypal evil into a symbol that each generation can reinterpret, ensuring that her shadow looms over film history forever. If this deep dive kept you hooked, the one on your screen is going to blow your mind, so check it out next.